I was trying to talk about a continuation of the basic ideas of the science of mind. Hopefully we ran out of that too at the bookstore. We had 50, who knows how many we have now. People have been studying it. It's a great book. And so I've been trying to do Kathianne's Reader's Digest version of this book, it's actually pretty basic and yet profound, which is kind of like a lot of truth, isn't it? I think sometimes we don't use universal intelligence intelligently, and I just want to talk about using it intelligently. That's what this book's about, because there is a universal intelligence. And it's been studied by so many, and the truths have been there for so long. Great masters and saints and sages have been saying the same thing and giving us instructions. And what I noticed way, way, way too young in my early 20s is they're all saying the same thing at the very depths and the very heart of them. Is that God with a country and western song? I love it. That's appropriate. Yeah. Yeah. So the information's been around for a long time, but sometimes it's just not used or not used intelligently. So today, after talking about the nature of mind, or this intelligence, and then talking about the laws that work through that mind, and I want to give you a metaphor today because saints and sages talked in metaphors. So if Jesus were around now, or Hafiz, he's the one with the barroom version of God, I love it. If they were around, they would probably talk in a metaphor, and they might say something like this: the kingdom of heaven is like unto a projector that is your consciousness. And the light of God shines through your consciousness to project onto the wall of your life that which is within you so you can clean it up. And then they just drop it. And then I'll probably tell you how to clean it up, because Jesus didn't do that. You're supposed to find that out on your own, which is a great way to do it. But today I want to talk about the highest working law. Because if we're going to talk about laws and all of the ways of all the laws and the levels of cause and effect, which is the greatest law, the law of cause and effect, which is last week, the highest working law is what I want to talk about today, and some of you know what that highest working law is. What's the highest working law? McKenna? Nope. The highest working law is the law to know there's nothing to do. Actually, love isn't a law. It transcends even the law. So you were right. But if we're going to talk law, it's the law to know there's nothing to do. So today, on the eve before Labor Day, why not talk about doing nothing? At least when it comes to your spiritual development. And for those of you that grew up in the self-improvement decades, this is going to be tough. Because for those of us that grew up doing self-improvement, doing nothing is a paradox. Isn't it? It's like, and what a paradox means, well, let me just read to you what I looked it up, what paradox means. A paradox involves two elements, truths, principles, or perspectives that seem contradictory, but both are true, such as, these are the best of times, these are the worst of times. All good teachers are servants. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. All of these are paradoxes. Much of the mystery and meaning, comedy and tragedy of life are based on paradox. For the most of the ardent champions of paradox are scientists who are still trying to solve the paradox of physics. I love that. See, it used to be so clean cut. Here's a law, you don't break it. Newtonian law, you don't break it. Oh, and then along comes Einstein. They broke it. And then we had M equals EC something squared. I don't know. What is that? Okay, E equals MC squared. Oh, smarty pantses. Okay, great. But that's why one mind. I don't need to know everything. You guys do. We're just talking here. So we have that, and it works. It works. It works in the known universe until they discovered that they could look at the very smallest particles of matter, and it got smaller and smaller and smaller, and the atom was broken up, and then the particles were broken up, and then they got quirks and subquirks and baby quirks. Saw them at the fair lately. Little baby quirks following the mama quirk. I think I'm high on Rafe's music. Anyway. Oh, good. Now we have poppies. Anyway. Thank you. Saved. Anyway, so when they got down to the smallest particle, the laws that governed when we got down to the smallest particle, the laws that governed the tiniest particles were not the same laws that governed what they thought was the universe. And there was a gap, a paradox. What's so great is that a scientist holds both and looks for what unites over them, because a paradox means beyond thought. You can't take a side. Literally, the word paradox means beyond thought. So we hold that it's true here, and we hold that it's true here. Now, what has to be true that both of these are true? It makes you go, oh, Now, there's still scientists that take a side, but they're not going to discover what holds them true because they're not willing to walk into the mystery, the paradox, the inconsistency. And what I've noticed is the more that I am on my spiritual path, the more paradox I run into, and the more that seems like an inconsistency, and yet that's where I can discover more of who I am and more of what's going on by embracing paradox. So there was a holy person who once said, "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape." You know that's true. So to go a little bit more into this whole idea of paradox and the dilemma that it brings about is that it really does mean that you go beyond thought and that you are willing to hold this and hold that. It's like having two relatives that you really love and both of them are opinionated. And you hold this one as right and you hold this one as right without holding any one of them as wrong. That means you have to be huge. Paradox makes us grow bigger. It's never either or, it's both and. What would our nation look like if we practiced more paradox? There should be paradox classes. I believe that paradox and the truth of paradox has been taught in many, many religions, but it was never put out that way. Well, now, brothers and sisters, we're going to study paradox. They just told you what to do, and sometimes what you do is in the words. For instance, the word shalom. Shalom, which we have translated as peace in Hebrew, also means, and more fully means, wholeness and completeness. Peace is not when all agree, for this is impossible. How many of you know, really deep down inside, it is impossible for you to have everyone agree with you? To accept that is to be more peaceful. And do you know and accept deep down inside that you won't agree with everybody? To breathe that in, you'll become more peaceful. It's like, I'm okay, you're okay, we're all okay. In fact, I think that came out of the S training. I hope I can repeat it for SDs, former SDs. Let me see if I got this right. When you get that you aren't okay, then you become okay with not being okay, and then you're okay. Got it? That was the end of the S training. A whole weekend of throwing up and all sorts of weird stuff, and that's what you get. Anyway, no, really. Yeah, there's a reason they stopped doing it. So what that means is one perspective can never be the be-all and end-all for anything. So one religion couldn't be it. One version of Ernest Holmes couldn't be it. One teacher couldn't be it. It has to include a lot because there's a lot to include. So that's paradox. So we move into paradox when we start to look at the law that says there's nothing to do, especially when we want to do something, which means that we will be challenged to surrender, let's take a deep breath, control. I do it that way because my naturopath, she's the only one that could ever take blood from me. I still touch this and my whole arm goes, oh, no, don't take blood. She's the only one that could ever do it where I never felt it. And she would have me breathe out. She said that opened you up when you're breathing out. You're more receptive. And then somehow she had in her mind that she was putting the needle through in between the resistance so that I didn't feel anything. It seemed to work. And I will tell that to other people who are trying to take blood from me. Do it in between the resistance. No. It doesn't work as well. So let's just breathe control out again. Control. Open up. Now, going back to last week, and you can see it on YouTube, or you can get the CD, it doesn't matter. But getting back to that, where the law is moving through your subjective, what is happening if you say, I must do something? When you say you want something, let's just, before I move on, let's go back to last week. And last week I challenged people to have a miracle in 4 months, because Alessandra went from 0 to Portugal in 4 months. Yeah, zip, zip, zip to Portugal there in 4 months. And I challenged people, let's do this. How many were there? And how many took the challenge? You're in for it. Good. You can still catch up. This is going to be Christmas will be the Miracle on Sandpoint Way. Thank you for getting it. So, anyone that didn't get it, talk to somebody else later. But anyway, I'm looking at doing that and holding that, and I gave some laws on how to look at the law to bring that about, and yet there will be a tendency to want to do something. We go from, dear God, I'm willing to accept this, to what do I do? Now, if you have in your subjective consciousness, what do I do? What is that telling the law? What are you going to have out here if the big thought in your mind is, what do I do? Tell me. Controlling, you're controlling. What else? But what does control say to the law? You don't trust. People that are in a lot of control don't really trust. So you don't trust. You don't trust the outcome. You don't trust the universe. What else are you saying to the law if you say, I've got to do something? What? Oh, put things in my way so I have something to do. That's a very high level. Oh, God, you're good. This is good. Because honestly, a lot of people are addicted to struggle. And if we can overcome a big thing, I overcame a big thing. Look what I did. Even if you don't say it to someone else, you got it in your own head. Look what I did. Now, what does "look what I did" say? You're in control, but what else is "look what I did" say? It's up to me. What have you just done? You've separated yourself from a force that can do something greater than yourself. So that whole concept of not what's mine to do. I don't mind that. But I've got to do something gets in the way of the flow. And it gets in the way of the law, which can handle things. That's why the greatest working law is the law to know there's nothing to do. Take a deep breath. Meaning you've done your prayer work. Now let God be God. Let God work. And I would really love it. This came from Cindy Clay because I was talking to her last Wednesday. I think we should have a big celebration of miracles. We should have a miracle day. Kind of like at the end of A Miracle on 37th Street. I didn't know what street it was. 34th. It was a street. At the end, there was this big celebration about these miracles. We should get together and talk about what happened from 0 to 4 months and celebrate. So we might do that. We've got to find a night, but let's do it. And have a potluck, okay? So how is it then that we shape our inner awareness so that we can have the conditions we want? That's the question, because we already know that we get in the way by thinking we have to do something. So how can we create a welcoming place through which the law can move so that we can have what we want in 4 months or this year or this afternoon? Ernest Holmes had as a formula, so I'm going to go with that. There's a lot of formulas. I have a few of my favorites, but let's go with his. He has a formula for building faith. And faith is the consciousness of expectation. See, we go from not believing at all to believing. But believing can be, yeah, I believe. But it's still a slot machine. I believe that if I just keep praying and doing something, eventually it's going to play out. I used to go like this, but they don't have those. Now they just push little buttons. I know eventually it's going to pay. And but that's a belief, which is really much more, it's just an enthusiastic hope. How many of you know you have beliefs that are just enthusiastic hopes? It's not an expectation yet. In fact, probably you expect it won't work. And faith is an expectation. So we can expect it not to work, which means we have great faith in it not working. So we want to have faith that the thing we have turned over to God, God will handle. And Ernest Holmes' formula for developing that kind of faith was in 3 steps. The first one is study, the next is prayer, and the last is realization. So let me go a little bit more into detail about how we study, how we pray, and how we realize. The first study is study that which supports you in knowing your own goodness, your own worthiness, and your connection to God. Now, I study a lot of things, but those things make me feel better and more expansive and more secure and more powerful and more courageous and more daring. That study, lifts me up. And it's the study of love in law. It's the study of how much the universe loves me and wants me to do well and give me all good things. That's the study that makes me feel like I can say, let there be, and something will happen. And I realized first service, I listened to myself. I need to give up studying those things that don't support that. So I'm giving up so much Facebook. The things I could do if I gave up Facebook. At night, I go to bed stalking you guys. Seeing who's doing what, because nobody talks to me. I can't communicate. So I like to know what's going on in your life. So I'm stalking everybody, finding out long before you showed up, I knew something was up. I want to be omnipresent in your life. And it's like, oh, get a life, Kathianne. Study something else. How many of you know that you could easily take an hour away, a day away from something, and if you put it into your connection with God, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So which leads me to the next step with prayer. But in this book, he goes into something that's very important because Ernest Holmes said that it's much more important to be concerned with where you pray from than what you pray about. And so he talks about going into your closet. In the Bible, it says go into your closet. People didn't have closets when Jesus was talking. Are you kidding? They lived in one room. They didn't even have a place to get away from the kids. I don't want to know how they continued to have children with all the children in the house. Anyway, really, did your mind ever go there? I'm sorry. I love it. You guys, maple leaves became something else. For me, I'm wondering how do they do it in one room. So there you go. It's being human. What closet meant, and it was, much later translated as closet, it meant to go away by yourself. What they're saying is you got to get by yourself. You have to get alone by yourself. And you have to court that presence because you're not being distracted. This is God time. I saw under Joey's chair one of the latest Science of Mind magazines, and there's a wonderful article in there by, is it Catherine Northrup? And she talks about her coffee time. She said, coffee took on a whole new meaning when I have my morning coffee and I talk to God. It's like God time. So remove yourself and feel its presence. Court that and then say something instead of just talking. Isn't it, how many of you, Let me say this in a good way. I bet in the past you've all had relationships where people talked at each other, but not to each other. Ever had one of those relationships in your far distant past, a long time ago? The same thing with the Most High. Don't talk at it. Going into your closet means you're willing to talk with it, and it will talk to you. That's prayer. So first you study, then you pray, and then you realize. And realize means that you come to the place where you know you've handed it off and it's done. And there's this great, sweet sense of, And if it doesn't happen in the 15 minutes you've given it that day, then you do it the next day. And if it hasn't happened, then you do it the next day. The illustration I used for service is that there was something that went on. It was big in my life. It was really, really big. And it took me all summer to get to the place where I knew it was handled. But once I knew it was handled, you know what? It was handled. But I didn't give up. I would sit on my lawn and I would look at the tomatoes grow, and I would move into my closet and I would try to hand it over as much as possible. And when I handed it over, I was at such peace, such shalom. Because the God that embraced me embraced all of the possibilities, and I was at peace. I was not afraid. And then somehow, the most miraculous possibility showed up way beyond my wildest imagination. So you seek that shalom, that embracing of all things, because God says, I am all things, and I got you. I got your back, I got your front, I got your feet, got your head, got you. That's a realization. Another time, and I use this example for service, I was in Santa Barbara, and in Santa Barbara, it's kind of on a plateau above the ocean, and so fog will roll in. So it's not unusual, at least then when I was flying back and forth, that fog would roll in and planes were stuck because they weren't allowed to land. You can kind of take off in the fog, but you're not supposed to land that much in the fog. So it's a much bigger deal. And so the whole flight the flights down there and the trips down there were always about the fog and making it in between fog, and I was doing pretty well until I was sitting in the airport one evening, wanting to go home, and the fog came in, and they announced over the intercom, I'm sorry, the fog, we think it's here for the duration. We're going to have to cancel all the flights. No planes can leave. No planes can land, and so therefore no planes will be leaving, and we're shutting down the airport, and I'm sitting there thinking, I can get a taxi, I can find a hotel, but I don't want to. And I was just in a place because I'd spent a weekend in a place. So out of that place, something happened, and I honestly just felt like something went. And on the intercom, well, we can't believe it. The fog is raised. And the United plane will be landing in just 15 minutes. If you're on that flight, most likely you will be able, on the next flight going out, most likely you'll be able to leave. So I was one of the few people that had stayed around and got the flight out. I don't know that was me. I don't know. But I think it was. And it wasn't me. See, that's the thing. I can't make this happen. I can't, push some button and something happen. But something happened through me because I had been in my closet. And there became a place where I and the beloved and God were one. And that's what I seek, because I do not worship Jesus. I follow him. And if he can say, the Father and I are one, I am too. And if he can say, greater things than these you shall do also, well, then I better be in practice. And if I can know that for myself, I know that for all of us. We're being called up. And perhaps play a game. perhaps what you'll manifest or have in 4 months, maybe that will happen or maybe it won't, or maybe it'll take longer. It does not matter. It's not about the thing. It's about the game. It's about becoming more familiar with the infinite, because it's hard to know the infinite, but it's easier to know it if you're playing the game. Okay, dear God, I think we'll play this game. Cindy, can I talk about your game? Cindy has a game that in 4 months she wants to manifest a trip for the whole family to Ireland. It's 0 right now, right? So she wants to go from 0 to Ireland in 4 months. Let's just see how that would work. But even then, it's not about that. Because in the process of getting there, you're going to know more God, because only God can make that work. I love the bait and switch. Let's pray. So I just ask that you move into the paradox of your life. The seeming inconsistencies, those big, huge gaps, and release your resistance to them. Release needing to know everything, figure everything out. And allow yourself to contemplate the idea that your heart's desire is leading you into a closer relationship with something that is a magnificent mystery. It's a mystery because we'll never figure it all out. There's no way in this finite incarnation we will know that which could be the intelligence beyond and behind this grand universe that we live in, and all the other universes that probably exist. And yet the paradox of that is we can know it so intimately. It can be closer than our hands and feet and closer than our breath, and we can know it and know it so firmly that we are never, ever, ever alone again. What a paradox. And so from this paradox, I speak my word that Spirit is here and present. And it is guiding us into a greater realization of not only the promises of the great holy books, but a greater realization of ourself and our connection to each other and to the universe, so that we can truly experience shalom, peace, wholeness, completeness. And so once again, for those of you that are on the miracle on Sandpoint Way track, hold in your mind that which you would like to have. Love it. Welcome it. Be glad about it. And then let it go. Thank you, God, for bringing us here this day. And so it is.